Greetings. Today we have Mr. Yogindra Raghav, a bioinformatics research technician at MIT's Department of Biological Engineering. He is a research affiliate at the Board Institute of MIT and Harvard as well. He has worked on various research projects, including computational biology. He is proficient in computer programming, and most of his projects lie on the intersection of biology and computer science. Good morning, sir, and we are glad to have you here.
Great to be here. Nice to, talk with you guys as well.
Yeah. And the first question to you is, what is bioinformatics, and can you give a brief description of your role?
Yeah, so bioinformatics is a really interdisciplinary field that merges knowledge in biology, chemistry, math, statistics, and computer science to tackle complex biological problems. An important point here is that I think it's a pretty non-specific term. So I would argue that if someone says they're a bioinformatician, you don't really know what they are doing. Maybe they could be working in many different distinct subfields, including those that work in analysis of next generation sequencing data, or they do computational drug discovery research, or maybe they do image analysis, so understanding detecting cancer from mammogram images. That's one example. My current job right now at MIT Bioengineering is split between doing pure research and being a research technician. So as a research technician, which is the majority of my role, I'm focused on scientifically relevant web development, data administration, high performance computing, and cloud computing to answer tough questions in biology. As a researcher, though, I'm working with many other brilliant scientists to better characterize neurodegenerative diseases such as ALS and Huntington's disease.
Wow, that was informative. And the next question is, what interest led you to choose bioinformatics, and when did you realize that you wanted to become a bioinformatician?
That's a good question. So I would say that in the ninth grade, I had a really wonderful teacher who taught me a lot about biology and did a great job when she introduced me to the subject to make it very relevant and exciting. And while my interest in biology lasted throughout high school, I also really enjoyed computer science, which I was introduced to in about the 10th grade. And so then by the time I was in the middle of my 11th grade, I mentioned to a close friend of mine that, I love these two fields, biology and computer science, but I don't know how to choose between them to decide my future path. And so, being the brilliant person that my friend was, he told me to Google bioinformatics, which was a new and exponentially growing field. And so I took that advice and was really shocked to see how computer science was being applied to these like complex biological data, and they were deciphering really interesting they were deciphering new understandings about these complex diseases. And so I realized that this was a perfect blend of my two major interests, going into bioinformatics. And so I decided around the middle of the 11th grade to go into it. And just for the viewers, depending on where you are, 11th grade could also be called 11th standard, just so that clarifies things.
That was truly inspiring. And the next question is, what is the most exciting thing in bioinformatics that brings you back to your job every day?
I would say beautiful data visualizations are really what brings me back. So I really enjoy how all the hard work that goes into running very computationally intensive analyses can many times at the end of the day be just represented in beautiful two-dimensional colored visualizations. So, for example, let's give a concrete example to the viewers. There are many scientific studies which aim to get the DNA sequence of participants in that study who either maybe have a disease or they're considered healthy. And so we can analyze this raw DNA sequence data, which is so complex and takes so much time. And then we can summarize the data we get from that into wonderful two-dimensional plots to show the specific genes and variants that are significantly associated with a given disease. And again, it might seem odd to others that, yeah, I just love, just simple, good old data visualizations, but it's really satisfying seeing this unwieldy, complex data reduced to the simpler parts. But I don't want to give the wrong impression about what I just mentioned. So There are many ways to actually visualize these complex data types, which gives many scientists decision fatigue. And as well, when we attempt to simplify a lot of this data into 2D or 3D visualizations, we sometimes lose the specific information about this complex data when we try to provide a summary. So yeah.
That was interesting. And the next question is, what do you like the least about being a bioinformatician, and how do you overcome it and refocus your attention?
I would say that the tediousness of troubleshooting computational tasks. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of people would agree with me, but regardless of how streamlined or automated you make a computational analysis as a bioinformatician, there's always bugs, and many times those bugs are very specific to you, and you'll be required to bend over backwards just to move on to the next step. And so to overcome this, I have the following philosophy. If computational bugs maybe are taking too long to resolve, for example, more than an hour without an actionable solution, I usually try to stop working on that problem immediately. And that's since I anyways have, 5 other things that I could be doing at a given time, because there's more than enough work as a bioinformatician to get done. And so to make this advice useful for others, I would say this: you should definitely stop working on a problem only if it isn't extremely urgent, which should be obvious. But as well, I don't stop because I feel lazy. When I come into these types of roadblocks that annoy me, it's out of a genuine belief that we tackle problems differently, even on a day-to-day time scale. So I could walk in tomorrow and I probably tackle the exact same problem in a different manner. I'd come up with a different solution.
Wow, that was insightful. And the next question is, would you say your role requires the ability to work in teams?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I work with research scientists, graduate students, professors, companies, nonprofit organizations here at MIT as well as across the world. But considering that a lot of the viewers will be younger, I think a useful piece of advice for them is to really focus on emotional intelligence. Because you will work with many people throughout your life, and I don't mean to be like a mini version of the famous entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk, but it's definitely one of the single most important skills I think in today's diverse work settings. And it's something that I have to work on myself. But if you're able to have this skill set, which is emotional intelligence, I think your professional life will go a whole lot smoother. So yeah, teamwork makes the dream work, I guess.
Oh, wow, that's really helpful. And the next question is, describe your day-to-day life as a bioinformatician, or what does a typical day look like for you?
Hmm. That's a good question. I'd say it's a bit hard, but I can try my best to average out, uh, my daily work schedule. As well, I want to preface this by saying that I guess I'm not a pure bioinformatician because I do bioinformatics research, but I'm also technically a computational research technician by title. And so I would say my day starts at some point, in the morning, like most people, checking and responding to quite a few emails regarding some, run this or do that or whatnot. But then next in the morning, I'll check on the status of computational pipelines and analyses that I would have been running on our servers since the previous days. If there are issues, which many times there are, I'd say I'd try to restart those pipelines or analyses. And if it's a longer fix, I'll usually save it for my peak productivity window after lunch. The next portion of my day, still in the morning, I usually spend like a 30-minute window to catch up on publications and new tools in the field. I try my best to do that every day. And by this point, I'll probably have a meeting, maybe 11 a.m. With some other research group or as part of one of the consortiums that I'm involved with. So it'll be a meeting for an hour. Then I'll go for lunch, have 30 minutes or so, and then I feel like peak productivity window starts. And so any really complex technical issues, I'd probably begin to fix that and hopefully get that done within an hour. And then in the later parts of the afternoon, I'm really working on ad hoc bioinformatics analyses that other researchers that work with me need, or even like more tedious, a little bit, data and web administration tasks. But Finally, I think the most exciting stuff near like the right end of my day. Um, I really organize my thoughts and ideate and try to analyze data regarding an independent project of mine that I'm working on. Um, and I would like to add also that even though the workday would be over, so let's say it's what, 5 p.m. or so, what I do outside of work is paramount to success at work. So, for the viewers, whether you want to hang out with a friend or read a book or play soccer, you really need to focus on finding things outside to help you deal with, I guess, another stressful but fun day of work. It'll really help, your days.
Oh, that's fascinating. And the next question is, what are the recent researches that are going on and what impact does it make?
Hmm. I would specifically maybe highlight like one really amazing, groundbreaking research, I guess, project that completed, uh, which happened this first week of December 2020. And this research could potentially change drug discovery, computational drug discovery forever. So there's a Google AI company called DeepMind, and they released this new program called AlphaFold, which has potentially solved a 50-year problem in protein sciences. And so the big, $1 million question that's been posed for a very long time is, can we predict the 3D structure of proteins within any given chemical environment, given only the 1D sequence or one-dimensional sequence of amino acids that makes up that protein? And so to this end, to answer this question computationally, there have been many different approaches that combine pretty advanced mathematics, statistics, and physics. And the AlphaFold program that just came out recently has taken advantage of deep learning techniques to solve this problem computationally better than any other algorithm so far by a very large margin. And it's so interesting, and they've done so well at predicting this 3D structure that it's nearly accurate to many of the experimental approaches used to resolve these 3D protein structures. And so, why is this important? And the reason for that is there's so many proteins in human cells that we have not been able to get a very good, accurate 3D structure for. And so, and many of these proteins are potentially linked to specific human relevant diseases. So without the 3D structure for the protein, you can't do computational drug discovery to try and maybe first find out where spatially in a 3D protein, these where you can inhibit the function of this protein by attacking some place on the 3D structure with a chemical compound. And so, yeah, it's overall, how we're going to use this or why this is important again. We could potentially use this new program and get really accurate 3D structures for disease-causing proteins, which we didn't have before. And then we can take that first step and really use the tools that are available in computational drug discovery to figure out those druggable areas within a 3D structure of a protein so that, again, we can alleviate a lot of the terrible diseases that are out there.
That's thoughtful. And the next question is, what surprised you the most when working on a project?
I would say, quite a funny or silly type of thing, to be honest. A while back, I was analyzing some next generation sequencing data so that I could understand which specific genes were available for transcription to messenger RNA in a large number of samples. And the person I was working with who did this experimental sample preparation before the computational analysis had done the work using samples from mice as opposed to human tissue. And due to a miscommunication, I analyzed these samples in a human tissue specific fashion. And I was so excited to receive all these great data visualizations to summarize how this data looks like and what we can do with it. And it was totally off. I mean, it was like mind-bogglingly off. And so thankfully, we realized this communication mistake, and I redid the analysis and whatnot. But to say the least, communication gaps can really waste a good amount of time. So you'll be surprised at how some of the smallest details or smallest things you might forget can really waste a whole lot of time. It's crazy.
Wow, that was really nice. And the next question is, did you change any of your or your family's habits as a result of anything you learned from your studies?
Yeah, I would say my studies definitely have changed my own thinking habits. I'd say that mainly I'm definitely a lot more skeptical of new information, and I really care about verifying the source and accuracy of information as best as I can. And so, this is really relevant to our day-to-day lives because we're receiving tons of news from popular communication channels such as mainstream and social media. And so, my studies really really made me want to question and think about what's true and what's not. And maybe even the bigger thing I'd say is my studies really have opened my eyes to the unbelievable complexity that is life and how little we really understand. And I would say that we're honestly just all a speck in this chaotic and this complex and chaotic physical world. It's really mind-boggling how complex our world is.
Wow, wow, that's fascinating. And the next question is, over the duration of your career as a bioinformatician, have you ever worked or seen projects in your field that you did not agree with as an individual?
I would say that, so far there's not been anything like that. I think it's a very, very interesting and good question. And, I've never actually been asked that before. That's a very good question. Um, there are many people who are definitely way smarter than I am, and they're, way more educated. They know a lot more. And so it's very hard for me to have a reasonable objection to other people's work, to say that, oh, this is definitely wrong, or they definitely shouldn't have done this, in a major fashion. I've never felt that way. But the only exception where I could possibly disagree with somebody's work is if there was ethical concerns. And I'll be honest in saying that the general scientific community has really like exponentially improved the enforcement of ethical research practices, even compared with just a few decades ago.
Yeah, that was insightful. And the next question is, what's the major difference between bioinformatics and biostatistics?
Yeah, that's there's definitely quite a few differences. I would say, in my humble opinion, biostatistics is more theoretical statistics focused, and it's usually applied for public health and translational research purposes, whereas bioinformatics is definitely much more broad and interdisciplinary, in my opinion. And so I feel that being successful in biostatistics kind of really requires that great statistical depth, but maybe not as much the biological depth. Whereas I feel like bioinformatics really merges the important skills from computer science and information technology, as well as, of course, biology to get the deeper insight. So I'd say that overall, one of them is a bit more interdisciplinary, I'd say bioinformatics, and the other one is a bit more specialized, biostatistics. And I do want to really clarify this. Both are very, very good career choices. They're different work, and there's really good scope for both. That's what I'll tell people in case they're thinking, oh well, I don't want to go into biostatistics anymore.
Well, that was really informative. And the next question is, how entwined is data science with your work?
Yeah, I would say that data science is definitely quite entwined with the work of for myself or any other bioinformatician. I usually say that data science is definitely the fun bit during the whole data and analysis pipeline that's involved in any research project. And data science is a large part, I think, of being a bioinformatician, and it's kind of right in the middle of it. So I feel like many bioinformaticians also take care of like the beginning and end bits that are not usually as maybe focused on in data science, such as like scraping data, updating the data, housing your data in some reasonable fashion for analysis purposes.
Well, that was fascinating. And the next question is, what would the world be like if there were no bioinformatician?
Yeah, I would say that there would definitely be a lot less insight into like the specific molecular cellular underpinnings that are really causal drivers for a lot of the diseases that are out there. So specifically, many bioinformaticians have successfully applied really interesting computational approaches to deconvolute a lot of the biological processes that are otherwise, painful or impossible to understand using solely experimental techniques. And so as time goes on, I really feel like people will be more appreciative of the role that bioinformaticians play in the current landscape of life science research.
Wow, wow, that was really nice. And the next question is, what would be the scope of bioinformatics in the future?
Uh, I would definitely say that the scope is definitely looking good, and bioinformatics analysis has definitely become central to a lot of life science research operations around the world. I would say purely based on the numbers and availability that I would expect the exponential increase in opportunities to continue to decline in the field. So the early to mid part of this decade, to 2010 to 2020, really saw I feel like the massive exponential increase in job availability in this field, but now things are starting to kind of even out a little bit more, as would be expected. But this is, definitely not something to worry about because there's still tons and tons of opportunities in the field. Yeah.
Well, that was nice. And what's your advice to the students aspiring to become a bioinformatician?
Good question. I would say that with this field becoming a bit more, it's more impactful, I feel like, than it's ever been. And it's as well very competitive, more so than it's been previously. I kind of guess from what I've heard and what I've experienced. I would very, very highly suggest, I'm going to say that again, very, very highly suggest that students, first and foremost, have the passion for biology. And then they should also definitely seek out advanced mathematical and statistical training. I'd say that it's definitely one of those regrets that I have, since in my undergraduate education, I really specialized in the biology side, which I love and which I loved and I still love. But having like advanced mathematical and statistical skills will, I think, really set you apart from the majority who, once again, maybe specialize in other subdisciplines such as computer science or biology itself.
Wow, that was really helpful. And the next question is, what qualities and skills are needed for a bioinformatician? Can anyone become a bioinformatician?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say you definitely need quite a few skills. So the first one, and I mentioned this previously, but emotional intelligence is definitely important in this field because I feel like it's there's so much collaboration, and so you're really gonna have to deal with a lot of different people who are going to be very different to you in the way that they think, act, so on and so forth. Next, what I think you'd really need is, of course, the real love. A real love for learning and exploring open source computational tools, which keep exponentially growing as the days go on. But they've, very useful things that have been put out there, really understanding it. And finally, again, you really need to have an interest in the biology behind any given problem in the field. So again, the major bonus I would say is, having good mathematical statistical background. But again, I'll keep that as a bonus for what skills, you'd want as a bioinformatician. And personally, I think that, not anybody can be a bioinformatician. It's meant for a select few who have that real passion for applying and developing computational methods to unravel the intricacies of biology. And to clarify that a bit more, I'm not saying that you need to be, the select few as in, oh, you need to be a genius to be in this field. I mean that there's only a select few who I really think absolutely love biology and computer science. And I think this is really similar to a lot of the other highly specific fields out there, such as, let's take nuclear engineering. I feel like if you want to go into nuclear engineering, you really need to have some type of real passion to go into that field and want to stay. So yeah, that's what I think you'd want in a bioinformatician, and who could potentially go on to be one.
So we have come to the end of our interview. And so would you like to add anything that our audience need to know?
Yeah, sure. I think I'd probably add like maybe just one thing. I noticed, in my undergraduate education, and this is true kind of with the rat race of how things are in the world nowadays, that there are a lot of people who are very, very much focused on, grades and very only quantitative metrics to, give themselves an ego boost or whatever. But I feel like there aren't enough people who really just love doing it for the sake of, doing it, love doing whatever it is that they're doing for the sake of doing it. And so I would remind people that if they want to go into this, definitely, as you're in your undergraduate education, let your research, let your education, all those things really be driven by interest and not by, well, I just have to do this. This is just what I have to do. That's definitely not the way I think to go about being in this field.
Oh, well, that was great. And thank you so much for joining us today. And it was really a nice time speaking with you. And we got to learn a lot about not only about bioinformatician, also about you and your life as a bioinformatician. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and I hope this will encourage some other people to get into bioinformatics, the younger
Yeah.
generation.
Yeah, sure.